Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Emma's Managers Meetup, Career Insights with Anthony Faulkner. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces and some new faces here today. My name is Michelle Ronquillo, and I am Emma's Event Manager. Just a little bit about us. For those who are new, within Emma, we bring together music managers organizations from 18 European countries representing over 3,000 managers across Europe. Our mission is to instructing European music managers globally, and we do this through Empower 2.0, our flagship program encompassing education, advocacy, networking, research, and international collaboration. Empower 2.0 is co-funded by the European Union and focuses on building a fairer, greener, more inclusive, and digitally resilient music ecosystem. If you'd like to learn more about Empower 2.0, I'm just going to drop the link of our new website in the chat, or you can do so at any time on emma.community/empower. And to stay connected with Emma, make sure to visit our website, follow us on social media, join our WhatsApp community group, and sign up to our newsletter. I will put all the links in the chat in a little bit. And also at the end of the session, when you log off Zoom, a very short survey will pop up. We'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to fill it out. Your feedback genuinely helps us to improve and shape future events. Today's session is moderated by artist manager Martin Paddy, who is also a member of the Emma Electronic Dance Steering Committee. And we have a very special guest, Anthony Faulkner, and we will know all about Anthony in a little bit. Thank you again for being here. And without further ado, let's dive into it. Martin, over to you.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good evening. I hope you're looking forward to our conversation this evening with Anthony. Me and Anthony have known each other for a while, so it's nice to chew the fat, as they say, with him about his life, his career, and his work with Max. So, Anthony, let's start from the top. Where did it all start with music? How did you get into the industry?
Thank you, Martin. Appreciate the introduction. Yeah, and thank you everyone for joining, and looking forward to the conversation to come. My journey in music started from early 20s. I think probably like most managers or creatives or anyone that works in the in music, they have their passion. They go to gigs. For me in particular, I didn't have anyone that worked in music. So for me, it kind of took me a bit later to realize it was like a viable career route. I did many different jobs before working in music. When I left school, I did acting for a short amount of time. And then following on from that, I did a course in graphic design, and that led me to then working in construction. I worked in restoration for a few years, and I kind of flipped and flopped. And I had many interests, but I wasn't particularly, everything that I tried was quite frustrated with and quite disenfranchised. And then that led me to leave in the UK for 3 years and pursue a career as an English teacher in Madrid, and in Spain. And then from that experience, I kind of built a confidence in the fact that I was able to develop my language skills. I started learning Spanish, and that kind of gave me this, like, well, if I can try really hard at this thing that seemed quite difficult to do, what would it look like if I turned my efforts to working in music? And that's what I did. I started promoting nights in Madrid. First off, doing these kind of Brit pop nights, and then that kind of followed on to electronic music house. And we started doing these collaborative pop-ups in these vintage clothes stores, and we got our first sponsor by a drinks brand, and then you start building the confidence and doing these small events. And then from then I was like, I really enjoy this and I'm really passionate about it. I'd love to be able to try and funnel this into a career, which prompted me to search online, and I found a university called BIM, which is the British Institute of Modern Music. And as I'd been living in Europe, I enjoyed that lifestyle of it was very cosmopolitan. Obviously being in Spain, it was quite sunny, and I just enjoyed being out. And there was a few places that BIM have a course, and I found myself going to a taster day in Brighton. And I'd never been to Brighton before, and I'm originally from Manchester, so it felt like a complete worlds apart. But Brighton felt similarly to, it felt like there was some kind of crossover between there and Madrid. So I was like, right, if I want to leave Spain, I want to go somewhere interesting and exciting. And then I kind of found this course, which was a BA Hons in music business, and then took the plunge, moved from Madrid, went to the UK, and then did a 3-year degree. And that's kind of, I used that as a kind of testing ground to try as many different roles in music as possible whilst doing this BA Hons in music business. I did tour management, did experience, like work experience in press. Then did experience in marketing, and then in my second year of university, I got offered a full-time job at a booking agent, and then from then it just kind of kept developing from there. So that was really my first introduction into music. First and foremost as a promoter, putting on small nights in the center of Madrid, and then trying to interrogate it further by going into higher education. And interestingly enough, I went to university as a mature student. I never went when I was young. I just went straight into employment. So that was kind of my main university, or putting on nights and then going down the university route to see because I had no idea what job roles were on offer. And it took me a long time, and I'm sure most people or not have had this, but when they first get into music, it's really confusing what all the different roles do.
Totally. Like I was very similar at your stage, and it was a similar route that I took, was being a promoter as well at university. I think that it's the cornerstone of all music is live events, so it's so integral. And I think having that, live experience and feet on the ground, and getting the events busy is a fun route in. And a story that I hear with so many managers and agents and labels and people in the industry, I guess, is like, what was that transition going from promoter and university degree to management and via the booking agency? Like, how did that happen? And when did you realize that that was the job that you fell in love with and now do?
Well, when I went initially, I felt that I had a skill set and temperament, and I was excited about the prospects of being a booking agent. And then when I was working, I was trying to balance university while working at this booking agency, and I found that I wasn't. I don't know if I was in the most appropriate headspace to really. I wanted to give it my all, but I was thinking I was stretching myself too thin, and I just felt very grateful to be in employment, in music at that period. So I had the kind of, when you first start with your first kind of full-time job in music, you have the rose tinted glasses, everything is just magical. And after a few months, I kind of felt that my performance probably wasn't as good as someone ordinarily who wasn't at university. And I didn't want to jeopardize both. And I kind of went to Brighton with the intention of getting this degree, as well as the cost that's associated with that. So I ended up resigning from the booking agent role. And then to completely finish on my degree, because I wanted a good grade. So that's what I did. And then a few days later, after leaving that role, I got a phone call from James Palmer Bullock, who was a former colleague of mine who founded the Wild Seeds, asking if I wanted to come and work with him part-time with Max Cooper. So, but my role was initially marketing and socials, and that was kind of comms lead. So that's kind of how I started working with Max, primarily as his marketing manager, like 8 or 9 years ago now. So that was my first kind of instances of working with Max in any capacity. It was from a marketing and communication standpoint.
Did that like give you experience and like a vision of what management was like, working with, the Wild Seeds starting out? And was that the moment you were like, oh, management's for me? That's the kind of thing that I really want to do.
It's interesting, like that question, because I think I got more from being at the booking agent, because I felt that even though when I started at the booking agent, albeit I did quite different, I started off as an assistant, and with being an assistant, there's a huge amount of logistics and coordination involved and itineraries. And I'm really glad that I had that experience, because I think it's informed my practice as a manager, and the fact that I've done PR, been a booking agent assistant, been a tour manager, done promotions. I feel that for me, it's really helpful because I understand that every role has its own crosses to bear. You know, every individual role has its pains and gains, and I think that the fact that I kind of understand that better informs my practice and makes me more empathetic, more understanding, and hopefully supports, you know, my role in terms of it being more of a facilitator rather than, that's always been my approach, rather than an enforcer, which I see it as the more of a facilitator role. So I think that it's all been helpful.
Yeah, like it's like that aspect of understanding the industry. Like definitely, I think that experience always puts you forward in the best step moving forward as a manager. It gives you that awareness, which is invaluable. And I guess what would be really interesting to know is that first days when you were starting to work with Max's marketing compared to now. Like, what was the vision for the project? Like with you and James, like working together, and now you've taken that baton on as his manager, and like how's that evolved over the time?
Well, when I first started working with Max, it was like 2018. He just released his, I would say, his second studio album, and I think at the time, just in terms of like an overview summary of like stats, I think, you know, he was doing a couple of 100 cap shows. You know, um, it was always challenging to, you know, we'd always have to kind of adopted certain techniques to really push the marketing, push the promotion. Um, you know, London was really developing, other territories were doing quite well. I think he had around 18,000 followers on his Instagram compared to now approaching 200K. You know, a similar kind of situation with all the DSPs as well. It was just the vision and the idea and the projects, it was all there. It was just like, I think that there was an understanding that it's just the consistency and the work ethic. And I think that there's always been a philosophy of like, work as hard as you can at this specific goal, and then just see what happens as a result. Because it's, for, you know, a large respect, it's out of your control. But I think you have to try and you just have to enjoy the process. And I think there's a lot of really quite challenging things about like artist development, but there's some like really incredibly rewarding and joyous aspects of it as well. So I think on
Totally.
part,
Totally. I mean, Max is such an interesting artist. You know, he's more than just a traditional like live touring artist. You know, he can DJ. He does AV installation, art spaces, you know, conceptual projects. You know, how do you manage working all of them throughout, you know, the cycles of throughout the year? Is it something that you have to be very, you know, particular like for you know, push forward on particulars of like, okay, we got to focus at these times, or is it a bit more fluid and you just let
I
it
think
drop?
you have to. I think that's a really great question, Martin. I think it's a balance between being proactive and reactive. I think you have to. There's always. I, I think from externally that, you know, looking in, it might seem that there is a complexity to the amount of projects and the concepts within the work. But I think really it's like, how do artists communicate with their audiences? The main element is releasing music. So I think, and touring, like live experience and releasing music. There are ways that artists can really communicate their work. And obviously with Max, we do installations as well, and that's been an incredible. There've been incredible projects to be part of, because it also doesn't require for Max to be present at these things, and they can kind of run for a period of time and connect with the work that way. But I think the really we've just been primarily focused on, you know, consistency, you know, whether it be releasing music or, you know, and touring as well. I think that's how you keep developing, you know. And if, you know, obviously it all really depends on the artist you're working with as well. I mean, you'll have some artists that have certain tracks and they kind of to connect to wider audiences for a whole myriad of reasons. Maybe they're more, you know, more accessible musically. Sometimes they cut through at certain times. But I just think that the way that artists communicate with their audiences via music and releasing music. So I think that's always been a central focus for us. That kind of baking that consistency into each year.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean,
we've released like an album every other year.
I mean,
You know,
it's no small feat to release that amount of albums in anybody's career. So it's, you know, a credit to Max and you guys. And I think it's really hard to, like you say, to be consistent, but also grow a business. So it's like it would be really interesting to see how you guys balance that artistic integrity and creation and consistency with also the commercial sustainability of it all as the business. Like, how do you guys approach that?
it's good. I mean, just so for context, we are like, you know, we release all the music via our own record label, which is Mesh. So Max's record label is called Mesh. It was founded in 2016, and the core value of Mesh it was a platform set up to explore the intersection of science, music, and art. Max has a background in the sciences. He has a PhD in computational biology, so that informs a lot. You know, that's informed his practice as an artist, and as such, we do conceptual albums centered around those principles: science, music, and art. You know, it ranges from philosophy to psychology to, you know, specific areas of science that he's interested in, and nature as well. You know, a lot of projects around the, you know, the laws of nature and the aesthetics of nature, and that, you know, that is a very rich and deep, a very rich topic to delve into, and it's something that, you know, that he really thoroughly enjoys being able to share ideas, and I think that he enjoys creating experiences that, you know, evoke awe. I think that's something that he really enjoys doing. So I think the commercial side of it, I think, as much as it's something that, you know, we have conversations about, and, you know, we have worked with people, you know, we, for the label, we have a business affairs consultant, Greg Marshall. Shout out to Greg. I know that he's you know, a founding member of AFEM, and very involved in the music management community, and a brilliant person, and he's been an incredible source of knowledge and wisdom to kind of bounce off, you know, when it comes to, especially around the label, when it comes to P&L and business affairs, and just having someone that's a support. Because I think a lot of music managers have different skills. I would definitely lean on. I would say I'd like to think that I'm gifted with both creative and business acumen, but I would definitely lean more towards the creative acumen. And I think you need someone to cover your weaknesses, and I think that's where team development comes in. Just if you're honest about areas that you feel you could be better at, and you have the ability to be able to bring people in that can cover that. I think it just helps the practice. Like, we've worked with Greg for a couple of years on the label side. We have Rosie Morris as well, who's the label manager, who's excellent, and she's, you know, very dedicated and has a brilliant work ethic. And when you're working with small teams, you have to have people that, you know, that have that work ethic, really, essentially. But in response to your question, Martin, I think I think the trick is just focus on the creative and make that the best possible thing it can be. And I do generally believe from that, all the other stuff in terms of like the work and incoming, you know, the incoming work and shows on it, kind of, in doing so, you hope that you attract all that coming in. And I think that's really what we focus on, rather than worry too much about X, Y, and Z. It's like focus on the creative, focus on the music, and hopefully everything else will work itself out as a result.
Yeah, it's a very good statement. One of my first ever jobs in the music industry, my bosses at the time would always say the music comes first, and I definitely believe that's a statement that always runs true in so much music business. So I can imagine that's a strong statement to stick by with Max. You touched on it before about your Max's team with the label manager and the business affairs. It'd be really interesting to know, like, what's the wider team, if like agents or, you know, other people that you work with, and how that works for your setup, basically, with Max.
Yeah. So I mean, just setup wise, the Wild Seeds has me. So we represent Max Cooper, and then we also represent the record label, his record label Mesh. So me and Rose. So that's me and Rosie Morris. So there's essentially two of us, and we have Amy Lewis, who's part time for us till June, just while we cover Max's next album project. So at any given time, there may be two or three of us, but primarily it's myself and Rosie. And then in terms of the campaign, the wider campaign, we have a press agent in Europe, We have press agent in UK that covers, some elements of Europe as well as the Americas. We have worldwide agent Marcus Noblet from Little Big, who's excellent. He's worked with Max for 10 years, so quite a long time. So he's been there from quite early stages up until now, and he does an excellent job. And then we have an agent in France and Italy, and Marcus covers the Americas as well.
Amazing. I guess it's that aspect that I find really interesting as a manager, is that aspect of like, what have you decided to like bring in-house and do yourself compared to like outsourcing? And is that something that changes campaign to campaign, or is that, something that's a bit more, purposeful that you're doing in the sense of like how you try and develop Max's business and thinking, okay, maybe we can bring this person in? Like, how do you approach that in the short term with with campaigns, and long term in like planning for the future?
So, say for example, I could give you an example of that. We've always subcontracted digital marketing teams. So we've got obviously having a background in marketing and doing that as part of my university. It helped me get a good grounding of understanding certain techniques and things to employ in terms of when we're doing campaign management, and paid media is something that we use, and we've used it to varying effects, and we found it very positive. I think there has to be a dance between organic and paid media, and especially just how everything is, a large majority of stuff is online. I think PR is still, in particular, depending on the artist, I think it is still really important. And I think it's a marriage of all these different techniques that kind of add up to the hope, or the kind of success of the perceived success of the campaign. But yeah, we have a team that does paid media. We have we've employed people in the past, like mail CRM consultants, just to kind of go through like our processes in terms of building Max's mailing list. I think more or less Max has about 40,000 subscribers on his mailing list now globally, which has been really helpful in terms of pushing, tour marketing, sign-ups, pre-sales for shows, and then obviously when it comes to releasing videos and stuff, we give the mailer usually 24 to 48 hour acts, first preview of everything that we kind of put out before it goes out publicly. So the mailing list has been really, in terms of, if we were looking at it from a marketing comms funnel perspective, the mailer is, the kind of the CRM around communicating with the audiences. Everything goes out to the mailing audience first, and then it kind of goes up the rungs of, we have a Discord as well, and obviously social. So it's kind of some insight into the kind of stats and the wider team of how it all operates.
Yeah, it's interesting, the mailing list. It's such a ever present that's been throughout my career in music, and it's something that I don't think has wavered too much compared to certain social media platforms and other ways of marketing. And I think that databases and mailing lists, and it seems to be the more ones that seem to stand the test of time. Is interesting, that aspects of like growth, and seeing that it's been really nice to see. I guess it's like understanding Max and his like multidisciplinary aspect. It'd be interesting what you find with that growth over time. What's been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced?
I think one thing for us is that there's a lot of channels to communicate on now. We cross post on TikTok, and we do YouTube Shorts. Max it's obviously no surprise that like with Instagram and YouTube are probably his larger platforms, because of the work is so visually, like as an audiovisual artist is very visually domineering work, so it lends itself to those platforms. But I think we've always, so our digital distributors Believe, we worked with them for around 10, well, yeah, coming up to 10 years this year, and we've always kind of asked, like, if there's anything we can do to support the visibility in the streaming portfolio, like these, the kind of streaming element of what he does. It's like we just kind of continually ask our teams of like, what do you need from us? And Believe we're always very like, if you could do YouTube Shorts, you post on YouTube Community, and then make sure you're doing a series of posts or one single. I know this seems really obvious, but it's just like information that they can then feed back to DSPs of like, Max Cooper's team has done X, Y, and Z on Instagram, taking his audiences to Spotify, Apple, Deezer, or whatever, and then in return for them going, okay, well, we can see that there's certain growth in this area. We can help, maybe put him on X, Y, or Z playlist, or some sort of kind of ad campaign, or some sort of listening party as a result, which has happened previously. So obviously that's it feels like a bit of a kind of random example, but if you kind of take that methodology and apply it to an agent or the mailer strategy, it's like we use OpenStage for our CRM. Previously we'd been on MailChimp, and we moved because we just felt that the OpenStage has a lot more parameters, and it's a lot more you can do so much more with the tech within the backstage, and they're a great team to kind of like, we want to develop the mailing audience. We want to grow from X to Z, to Y to Z, and they will, if you ask for help, they will give it you. And then you can just kind of experiment with certain techniques on socials. And I think one of the beauty things, I saw a comment saying that it's really important to own your own data, and it really is. I think it's been really pivotal in selling tickets, and it also takes the pressure off socials. I think we all, as music managers, feel that probably the pressure of the mounting demands that social media presents, and I think that we just like to showcase the art as much as possible. And yeah, we do continually promote shows, but someone in Brazil doesn't really care about a show in Basingstoke. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like you've got a finite amount of focus from people and their attention, and to constantly bombard them with shows in regions there that I've got no connection with feels a bit tedious at times. So, which is where the geo targeting and the mailer comes in, and it's excellent because you can kind of build the main list in different regions and then target them specifically when there's forthcoming shows, and you can personalize them as well, which we write templates out. Max does the text, and then they get a personalized message, and the open rate is so much higher because it's a personalized message to that region.
Yeah.
It's
it's interesting. A lot of people I've spoken to about mailing lists and this CRMs and interaction from artist to individual directly. It was like the socials are the window shop front, and then the inside the shop is your website and your mailing lists. And I think that is, like you said, the open rates are higher, and it seems to just every single successful artist I speak to always have this like direct to artist approach, and it seems to be really well. I guess on the other side, like you've seen success from this mailing list and CRM now. Was there ever a difficult period with anything that you work with or across with Max that kind of like changes how you work and how you're set up nowadays?
Well, I mean, there's still challenges now with the mailer. I think you still see certain areas where you could develop more, and I think that just posting on social saying sign up to this mailing list if you're from this, and kind of target a specific area, doesn't really do it justice. It just, sometimes there's a natural development to things rather than like you can do all these techniques, and sometimes it just takes time. And I think being patient and being kind in terms of like, you want results, but also not to the extent of like not enjoying the process. Like that it's all, I think adopting like a sense of curiosity and experimentation is probably really important into like the results that you get. But just, I guess, key challenges, I guess from a touring perspective, I think we've certainly from our side, you have certain locations and regions that just do naturally just do better because we've got a more of a kind of developed profile in these areas, and then we're building in other areas. And I think with the economic challenges that we've just seen across the board, just a slower, most customers will buy tickets later. So there's kind of a delayed reaction, which I think I feel quite a lot more comfortable with now. You certain shows you'll see in the 2-3 weeks in the run up, you'll see like a huge sharp uptake in ticket sales. So I think it's took us a while post-pandemic to kind of understand how consumer behaviour is affecting ticketing, which I always thought like maybe there needs to be some sort of kind of Klarna function in ticketing platforms now, where what like they adopt with retail, where you can just like buy now and pay later. I don't know if that would make any difference, but I always thought that sometimes I've definitely felt like post Christmas, there's always like January, February is always quite slow naturally because everyone's blown all their money during Christmas and they're just kind of waiting for that payday. So I would say that's probably been quite challenging, and certainly challenging with promoters, and we're just trying to be as supportive as possible. We sometimes plug in our own digital marketing services to support promoters with paid media ads, and that's had varying positive effects. I found that I've had to be more supportive over the last 12 months with promoters in general, just because of that, and then having concerns about slow kind of later ticket sales, and it kind of puts everyone on edge a bit. But more often than not, the shows are doing really well. We've done a tour in Asia, and we sold out most of the shows there in Perth and Melbourne and Seoul and Japan. So yeah, I think across the board tickets seem to be doing okay, but there's still that, like I mentioned, there's still that kind of delayed. People wait to the last minute to buy things.
Yeah, I think it's just consumer habits that I've noticed myself as a punter, but also as a manager, I've experienced this myself as well. I guess you touched on the international touring aspect of Max and how he's toured extensively around the globe. I guess for you, what markets and like partnerships have been key to helping him grow like internationally and like seeing the project be pushed into all four corners of the world?
I just thought, to be fair, I got distracted by a question that just came up saying, "Has anybody been turning points?" Which I feel somehow links to the question you just asked, Martin. There's always been like a very kind of slow, like it's always been a very steady, like constantly developing, constantly building. We've released quite a few studio albums now, so it's just you continually building on top of each other. I mean, I think the last couple of years we released more or less an album a year. Some of them are varying kind of timelines, to 6 to 12 months. The last album campaign in the last 18 months, it's probably a bit less than that, 14 months. I mean, we've still been there's 13 tracks and 13 audiovisual collaborations, and we released the album last February, and we only released one of the last videos a month or two ago. So it just shows you the kind of how much content we have around these certain projects we could just continue to push out, which connects further and develops audiences. So there's been specific campaigns that have been successful. We did a commission in 2019 as part of the Barbican Centre. So they commissioned Max to do an album around, if I remember correctly, the year was about how technology is shaping society. And Max did a project called Yearning for the Infinite. It was like a project around the obsession of like this human obsession around yearning for more, and this drive that we have for more. Whether it be a football team that each year you want to keep pushing to get that trophy, to get better, to do better, or whether it be self-improvement. That album in particular obviously touched up in the infinite in mathematical terms and like psychology and within the sciences. There was a lot of conceptual elements from that. So I mean, that was the headline show was at the Barbican, which sold out. So you keep building, you just keep doing these certain shows, and then that kind of the advocacy from the Barbican then helped facilitate a few other conversations that open doors in other areas. So I think it's just a kind of steady building. I think we have a wish list of stuff that we want to do. Max has a very clear vision, has a great focus and a brilliant work ethic, and I think that collaboration with someone that puts a lot and invests a lot back, it sometimes just makes the whole process a lot more, it just makes the whole process a lot more easier.
I definitely can imagine. It's really interesting, like Max, you touched on it about he does so much with like contemporary art and academia and stuff that is beyond, a gig space or a festival or a nightclub. I guess is that how intentional from the offset and things develop has that positioning be? Is that through his his PhD, or is that just through his passion and vision, or yeah, is that something that was brought on by the wild seeds? Or yeah, I guess it would be interesting to hear how intentional that was at the start and moving forward as well.
I mean, as I don't want to speak too much on behalf of Max in terms of his processes and how he's become the artist he is today. But I think that what I can say is that he first cut his teeth as a resident DJ in Nottingham at the Firefly parties, and he primarily started off as a he was a turntablist, then he was a DJ, and then so there was a lot of experimentation in his as a practice as an artist before the artist that you see today, and I think he released his Emergence project in 2016, which that incorporated that the audiovisual elements of what he did, and then the sciences and the sciences in particular, and that was kind of really the start of it, really. And up until then, I felt like probably a large of it is that it was research up until then. So I do think when we're working with other artists in the past, sometimes the vision, there's that you've worked with people and they feel like they've got the kind of vision there, but it's not really sure. And there was a lot of music that was released before Emergence, and it just takes that time to develop the practice. And I think is a really important, having the space, carving out the space for people to develop their practice. I think is really important, and I think something that's I think a lot of people lose sight of now, because there's urgency to kind of commercialize it or make money from it and all these other things, which is really important. I understand this, our practices as music managers, but I do think that there needs to be some space to leave to continue to develop that.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think that's a really good point. I guess you touched on this earlier before about this being reactive and long-term planning, and you say about how Max is very hardworking, and I guess it's like, do you feel like he has like a really strong vision of like where he wants to continually develop in the long term? Is that something that you have to handhold him with a bit, or is it more such a collaborative thing?
I mean, we work very collaboratively. He has very clear on he loves making conceptual projects. He loves making installations. He loves creating, being commissioned to make audiovisual immersive experiences. He makes albums in spatial audio. He was one of the first four artists to make an album, a project in Dolby Atmos. So he's been involved in spatial audio and immersive, storytelling from like especially when it comes to that format from its early stages. So he's been very much like attuned to like what the kind of developing his practice around live experience and immersive storytelling. So he's always looking at ways to kind of find that from technology or a collaboration or a theme in the sciences to evoke that. And I think that's something that's I'm sure it just keep developing through each album that we do, each installation that we do, each live show. It's always there. I can remember a time we were playing in Birmingham, and probably spent a few hours setting up, and he got it all set up, and then we went to get some dinner, and I could tell that he was like slightly distracted. And then he was just like, right, I'm just gonna have to go back. And he went back, and then I think he figured that he could put another projector on this wall and stuff. So, and that I think it was a couple of years ago, and it's about 600-700 cat venue. I do believe that other people would go, do you know what, that's enough. I'm gonna have a bit of food and then have a pint and then I'll do the show. But you could see that like something was bothering him, and he was like, do you know what, I'm gonna go back and just spend another hour, an hour and a half tinkering, fine tuning to just get just this kind of this pursuit of excellence in him for what he does and the experience he wants people to have. And I think I think it's a really beautiful thing to have. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's has his experience and the success he has, because he devotes a lot of time into what he does. And I think it's a work ethic as well as a principled thing that he really cares, and it shines through in what he does.
It's like a kind of obsessive habit that I find some creatives have, where they just, every fine detail, and they have to just absolutely nail it right on the head, and they really want to create the best album or the best live show possible. So it sounds like Max has got that through and through.
Yeah, it's just this pursuit of like wanting to do the best that he possibly can, and I think that's what we never have an internal conversation about like morale or like today we've got like come on today we've got to do this, and it's just like there's just this kind of, and I think this is just developed from years of working together. There's just this understanding that like we all want to work really hard at this one thing, and as a result, like it just there's just kind of this invisible bar that we're always trying to like push to. He's there was an expression that was by Max by name, Max by nature, and I think that's kind of him. Like he doesn't need to. He's got like skill, like natural skills as a leader. He doesn't need to come in and go, "Hey guys, you need to do this." Like he just works. His work ethic is so high. By anyone that around him, they just kind of want to match that. And I think that's important, because I've in the past I've worked, with creatives, and sometimes when I've seen it before as well with other people. Sometimes when artists do get managers and agents and stuff, and I've seen there's a tendency to kind of lean out or lean back and think, okay, right, I've got a team working on this now. I don't need to, do X, Y, and Z. And it's just like I don't know. That for me has always been causes friction. Seen it cause friction. So, if you've got an artist that's, working really hard and wanting to develop and sets the bar high, I think that shifts the team into a different way of working. And yeah, it's great to be a part of.
It's really interesting, that aspect of continually hard working at any stage of a career. I've seen it pop up a few times with artists that get an agent for the first time, or they work with a proper big established label, or they work with a manager for the first time. Like you say, they take the foot off the gas. Feel like they've got a good team, and they kind of stutter a little bit in their career. And it's really interesting. I spoke with a marketing manager at a major label once, and he was like, the best artists are the ones that you're chasing up the hill after, because they've got all the ideas, all the energy, and you're trying to catch them, all the ideas as they run up the hill, and keep up with them. And he was like, the artists you don't want is the ones that you feel like you're pulling up the hill to force to get anything done. And I always liked that expression. I thought that was really interesting. I guess with Max's energy and all these projects going around all this time, it must be really hard to protect yourself and your own like approach to a lot of things. Like, how do you protect your own energy, your work time, your free time, and navigating all these different projects at once? Like, is there a way, the process that you, as well as the Wild Seas, have with Max?
I would say that I'm not very boundaried. And it's something that when I say I'd like to be more boundaried, I'm like, how do I do that? And do I want to do that? And I really enjoy the role that I have, and I've done a lot of different jobs in the past. So I feel very grateful that I feel grateful to be doing this and doing it with people that I really admire, and working with people like you, Martin. I know we share an office together, and it's I really enjoy having a creative role, and sometimes it's it's a real gift to be able to do this. And I think so the workload, to some extent, it doesn't bother me too much. I just kind of I enjoy it. I do enjoy kind of problem solving. I was always told, because in my younger years I probably was annoying someone, and they said you need to come to work with a solution based mindset. And I must have been going to them with constant problems. And I don't know, it was a real turning point for me. I'm like, okay, that's really interesting, because I respected them and I didn't want to piss them off. And I was like, okay, what does it look like to have a solution-based mindset? And it just really stuck with me. And I think that, and it sounds really cliche, but I just tried to come to work with that mentality. I use a timer just in terms of like day-to-day techniques. I've got a timer on my computer, so I do like 30-minute increments of work, and then I try to have a 5-minute break, and then I go back in again. And I think most most things, most tasks can be done within 30 minutes, even if it's something that's really annoying and you don't want to do. I think most things can be done in within 30 minutes. So I found that that technique's been really helpful for me. And I've actually got a planner. I bought a planner that has these kind of priority tasks and subtasks, and then like a day plan. And I found that if I spend half an hour the day before planning out my next day, it just, sometimes things come in. I know, like, have, an emergency or some other project needs a priority, and I think that's fine. I don't think you need to rigidly follow this, but I think for me it particularly is helpful, because sometimes, yeah, I think there's a lot of projects, and with the roles that we have, you have to kind of give answers or solutions, and sometimes it can be really distracting and can be overwhelming. So I think sometimes it's better just kind of that technique seems to ground me in particular. It works for me. I don't know if it will work for everyone, but I've just found that's been particularly helpful. Of all the different ways I've tried to work, that's one that I keep coming back to.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting trying to figure out your own workflow, and something that I'm, 10, 15 years into my career, and I'm still trying to nail down and figure out myself. I guess as we're, coming to the latter part of the talk and hearing about yourself and Max and everything that's been going on, so what advice would you give some of the managers listening in the room now, or, later when they watch back? For artists that don't fit neatly into a genre or industry box, like, how is there anything that you have done or would advise that you've done with Max that has really helped?
I think that sounds even more exciting than a prospect of someone fitting in a box. I think it sounds like a wonderful opportunity to do something different, and I think it might be a longer path, it might be a longer road, and sometimes, yeah, that can be irritating, and sometimes there's no way of expediting it. And if there was a way to expedite it, would you really want to take that? I was always told, if you want to take shortcuts, you'll get cut short. And I don't know, that's something that's stuck with me as well, in terms of I think that the one of the things that I've really enjoyed about what we do is that we have full creative control. And that sometimes maybe sound like a cop out for people that don't work for major labels. I can hear people like, well, I think there's great ways of working independently, and there's really profound and beautiful ways working with majors. We've just found our groove, we've just found our groove being fully independent. Everything's self. We've been awarded grants and funds in the past, but largely the majority of everything we do is self-funded. That presents its challenges, when you come into drafting budgets for album campaigns, I think it also it can make you better at what you do. If you've got limited budgets to work across certain things, you've got to employ different techniques that you try and cut through. And I think, I'm not saying that huge budgets make you lazy by any stretches of imagination, but yeah, I think you have to experiment more when you've got less budget to play with. And I think for the large part, I think we do exceptionally well with the budget that we have. And as the project develops, hopefully the budgets get larger, in terms of developing visibility and investing that more back into equipment or installations or art projects and commissions for visuals. Hopefully that will just keep having an impact in some way.
Yeah, I find being creative with budgets is actually where the best results are made, because you're not, like you say, chucking money at a project and being like, we can get this really well paid X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z to push the project on. So I think that's really, really good advice, and advice that I've tried to take myself on. I guess looking at back at the whole time
I
that
might
you.
just
Oh no, go
summarize.
on.
I think consistency. I think any project, regardless if it's unique or not or whatever it is, the consistency element is just vital, because it can be really talented but not release music every 2 years or so. It depends if they're Frank Ocean or not, doesn't it? But it's like, I don't know. I just think the consistency then helps to develop momentum, and then from that, then you develop the profile. So I think, um, and in terms of the projects, like what's the story? How are you trying to communicate? What is it you're trying to communicate? Um, how is this? Sometimes I think starting from, like, it doesn't matter how many people you impact, it's how you impact. Like, what is it that you're trying to communicate? And to be honest, some artists are not like, I don't think you need to explain everything. I'm not saying that there has to be a constant why, like, around things. I think leaving some space for people to project their own lived experience into the work is really important. But yeah, just be consistent and try and enjoy the process as much as possible, and ask the people around you, what could we be doing better? And I've always found that's always helped to, yeah, none of us are mind readers. We can't, and all of us have our own strengths and weaknesses, and there's certain things that as music managers we can't always be over. And I think sometimes we may like to think that we have all the answers, but we absolutely don't. And I think that's, you just have to try and seek support from your team. But I always think, like, what I always like to ask, what do you think we're doing that could be done better, or is there anything you feel like we're missing? And I think from each project, every EP, every album, that we just keep developing from that, and then just our own things that we've just discovered on the way.
Yeah, it's the consistency thing is it seems a really good one, and I had some advice that said, well, no, just someone previously I worked with used to say it takes 10 years to make an overnight success, which I always loved that one. Looking back on it, you obviously have worked on so many projects. Like, is there anything that you would have done differently that now in your position of experience with Max?
Good question. I mean, nothing that particularly comes to mind. I'm sure I'm absolutely positive there's probably things that I could have done differently, or regrets, or think, oh, I wish I'd done that and we didn't do that. I always kind of, nothing that particularly comes to mind, because I think that I'm really grateful for where we're at, and all the experience, all these things have led to this moment. And I think that without the mistakes, without the mistakes and without the wins, it's impossible to know where you be. And I think depending on what the mistake is, it's helpful to fail, and I think being comfortable with that. And in my earlier years, like, when I first started out in music, I wanted to be perfect at everything. I wanted to be perfect at the marketing. I wanted the campaign to go perfectly, and I think it made me miserable. And really, it came from, probably insecurities in me, and also just wanting to get the best out of the work and for the artist. And I think that maybe that perfectionistic tendency, which is really good fuel to drive you, it can be quite detrimental.
Totally. I
You have to,
relate
you
to
have
that.
to mess up. You have to mess up. There's been, campaigns where, through just human error, like, music's been released and it's not been the right WAV file, or there's all sorts of, like, issues, and things have gone wrong, or the press release had typos in it, or I don't know. There's, I don't want to list all our failings, but I think, yeah, it's just stuff happens, but it's like, I think it's how quickly you fix them. And I think people often are not, like, they know if it's a mistake from complacency or just a genuine mistake.
Yeah. It's
I
interesting. My
don't
brother,
know if that's a helpful insight at all. Yeah.
my brother used to say that it's never a mistake; it's a learning opportunity. So yeah, I thought that was always Good one. I guess as we've only got like a handful of minutes left, we should see if there's any more questions that have come in the chat. Someone's put in the chat, what kind of tools are you using for Max's project? Like, you've mentioned about the CRM. I can't remember which one you said, but is there any
So,
others that you would
but the main
recommend?
list is OpenStage. We use Dropbox as like our, folder sharing management. We just use Google Docs. Google Docs are brilliant, like the sheets and the docs. Obviously, I wouldn't be too concerned about being swimming in docs. I just make as many docs as you want. There's no rules, I just think the more list, the more docs. Like, for me, I just don't get too precious about it. Just we have started incorporating Miro maps to certain projects when we're storyboarding things, and that's more come from the visual studios than it has for us. I've used Gantt charts in the past for installation projects, but more often than not, we've got like Google Sheets that has the calendar, and then from that we have like specific links that shoot off into other docs. So yeah, it's a bit of a kind of complex web of Google documents. But yeah, I've tried the Asana route. I hated it. I tried Trello. They just don't really work for me. We use WhatsApp, Dropbox, and Google Drive, and Google Docs.
I think the whole setup of a music management company, but also an artist business and ecosystem, it's understanding what works for you, and every artist and every manager is different. And I think it's just getting into that swing of it. Someone else has said, you mentioned that PR is still important in the marketing mix. What would you say the most important role of a publicist plays in today's media landscape compared to 10 years ago?
That's a good question. I can only speak for an artist like Max. I think that it's still really helpful to have that, that profession in place, and for them to communicate to media and publications of like, this is where he's up to, this is the project that he's involved in, and then inviting them to shows and for them to experience it for themselves, with the hope that that will lead to a review or a feature or an interview. And I think not only I understand that a lot of people we can imagine that most people predominantly just spend their time scrolling on socials. I think that people do, as people do trickle down in terms of like being, the kind of, the model of like awareness and interest, and then desire, that people will, that there is a huge array of documentation of milestones from a media lens of like where Max is and his journey as an artist. And I think even the practice of Max being interviewed and for him to be able to kind of communicate his work, I think is really important. I think as he's developed, you have to be a bit more selective about his time and the commitments and the publication. But I do think that it's also helpful for me to read these things. But from a, it's a great thing to share, for the audience that really care about that kind of stuff and want to understand more about the artist and its practices. This week we did a feature with Ableton, where Max delves into his musical process, and the screenshots of the DAW, and then he kind of talks about how his musicality informs the live shows and vice versa. And I think that it's just nice to have that, fossilized online with an organization that then we can, cross collaborate on a post. And it's not going to move the needle, but it's just this kind of nice stack of evidence of Max is who he says he is. And especially with album reviews, we still use those quotes from publications in the tour marketing, especially with paid media, or when you go onto a specific show and they've got a landing page and there's certain quotes from Six Music or Vogue or Rolling Stone or whoever it is. It's like, people might not be aware of Max, but they're aware of those publications, and they see a quote that's giving advocacy. That still helps to, develop interest, and maybe as a result of that, they'll buy a ticket. So it's hard to quantify at times, but I think there's still, maybe a bit of a traditional perspective on it, but I still think that it plays a role. Maybe I would, in response to the question, I don't know I think that at one point you'd have certain publications and it felt like it broke an artist. You know, you'd have them in the cover, you know, they'd have them featured in NME, and then that would be it. As a result, they'd be able to go on a tour and all these other things. Obviously it doesn't work like that anymore, but still plays a role in the whole campaign. Hopefully
Something
that
that I've
answers the
noticed.
question.
Yeah, something that I've noticed as well. I think, you know, there's certain things that used to break artists like like national radio and press, but it's still part of the mix. It's just maybe it's not breaking them
Yeah.
as much as they were like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think one thing that's probably important to communicate is that it is expensive. It's not cheap. It's an investment, and I think we've all probably experienced at varying times where we've not got the results back, and we understand that that could be for, you know, a whole multitude of reasons. But so I think it's like when to apply it. You know, we've always had a bit of an always on approach. We've had retainers and we've done individual projects, but I think it's just being aware that regardless, you know, maybe you won't get the outcome from a feature or review perspective, but I do think that, you know, it's helpful to be in people's inboxes.
Yeah, I think it's that visibility aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank
I think we've
you.
got to the end.
Yes, sorry to appear suddenly, but thank you so much, Martin, and thank you so much, Anthony, for a super insightful session. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy it. We surely did. There's a few more questions that hopefully, yeah, we get to answer later. And for everybody else, don't forget that we also have next week PJ Harvey and Katie Miluga's manager, Samit Bothra, coming. And on March 11th, we have the Hive's manager, Matthew Green. So don't forget to register. And once again, thank you all so much for being here. And see you in our next Managers Meetup. Thank you so much.
Everyone, thank you.
Guys.